Hello and welcome back to module number 3. Today we are going to talk about organization of information and knowledge. In the field of information science, we call it knowledge organization. Before we get into how do we organize knowledge, I would like to talk about our syllabus and where are we at and how we going to move forward. And so this week you finish your quiz number 1, and next week you're going to have starting to talk about information technology and information retrieval. You're going to also have the quiz number 2 based on the reading with regard to knowledge organization, and you're going to receive from me a layout for the major paper that is due on July 20th about the purpose of your major paper 2. So I will talk about that. I will announce it. I will provide more announcements on that next time, and so you will have better idea what is it entail and how is it what it will be covered. But I want to start again with module number 3 and the idea of organizing of knowledge and information. I will treat the term knowledge and information in the same way, just to make sure that, because in the vocabulary in the field of information science, we talk about the role of library not as organizing information, even though it is, we're talking about libraries as organized knowledge. So this is the terminology that I'm going to use. I hope that it will not confuse you, and I hope that it will make more sense. So the idea was that library, as a traditional way to organize knowledge, print knowledge, was based on a physical place where they kept all those manuscripts. Nowadays, in the development of theoretical understanding how to organize knowledge and how to apply that to computers, there were developed new ideas how to do that. So the aim of this module to represent to you how we organize knowledge in the past, and we're going to start also talk about how we are going to apply that knowledge in the future, and we will see an example of that, how one company started to organize this type of this knowledge in their website and how they do that. So they're approaching information and knowledge. There are things that we want to know, and there are ways of looking at things or subject, etc. Example, sex, the subject of sex. When we can look at that through the biology eyes, or gender studies, or pornography, or even medicine. And by doing that, we can see different approaches, how they see what is data, what is information, and what is knowledge in that particular field. Biology look at those terms differently than the gender studies does. And so one of the things that universally apply to all those fields is classification. The classification provides us a descriptive framework to organize ideas and structure to a relationship among those subjects or ideas. And so example, science, the classification consists of science usually consists of physics, chemistry, biology, and so on and so on. And so in this field, we can see that chemistry is the first classification, but under chemistry, there is also sub-classification. Organic chemistry is a sub-classification of chemistry. So the idea of classification is that we classify information, and by doing that, we are allowing to have sub-classification and sub-sub-classification in order for us to have universal way to us to look at knowledge and information. The library classification system consists, in this example, consists of 3 types. The Dewey classification, the Library of Congress classification, and the federal government classification, which is called SUDOCS. And you will see how they apply that and what they do in order for them to create a classification system that is accessible and available to everyone to look at. The first and most important classification that every information scientist need to learn is the Dowey classification. And it was created in 1976. The idea here is that he classified the information or gave it identification by numerical value. And it started from general to specific. So the longer the number, the more specific the topic is. So in this case, under Dowey classification, we have the general subject. Example, religion. Example, art. Example, literature. Those are generic subject. But if we are looking at sub-classification, example in geography and history, the sub-classification under the catalog number is 970, which is general history of history. And 773 is the general history of the North America of the United States. And by doing that, it allowed us to add another dimension of the author and the title of the page. I will talk about the title in few seconds, and I will show you how they organize it into the catalog when we are talking about control vocabulary. But beforehand, I just want to make sure that you understand that this classification helps libraries across United States, Europe, and even Asia to organize the same way those manuscripts and allowed any user who comes to the library to have easy access to it. The Library of Congress classification is a little bit different. We are talking about not numerical value, but instead alphabetical, and it is linear, then more from the general to specific. And if you click on the link below, you will see more details about that. So in this case, A is a general works, B is the philosophy, psychology, and religion, and T for me is always the technology. So in this case, what we see here in the catalog identification of a manuscript is that you have a major class P, which is language and literature. PR is a subclass or subclassification of English literature, and 673 is English literature between the years of 1961 to 2000. Then again, as the Dowey classification, we have the author identification, the title identification, plus another dimension that they add is the year of publication. In comparison, the US federal government also had their own system, and it is called SUDOCS, and it is issued by the federal agency. And so the idea here is that it allowed the federal government employees and us as a user to see what is it entail. So in this case, we are talking about the HE identified the agency. In this case, it's the Health and Human Services. The class number is the number, it's followed by the column, and the column represents the class number from information specific to the document itself. So in this case, it's more pragmatic in compared to Dowey classification in order for the federal government to retrieve all the documents they are producing. And this is again the way for them to have a classification system that identify what is it entail. Example, all the congressional committees and hearing is being classified and documented. And in order for them to follow up in all those discussions they have to have a system that allow them to store and retrieve those discussion. I said one of the things that we are very concerned about library is the control vocabulary. Many words can describe the same thing: US, USA, United States of America, and we can represent them in different ways. Another example is Apple. Apple is a fruit, but it's also a company. And so all those things is the idea that we are trying to be more consistent with regard to the control vocabulary we are used in order for us to use it in the catalog, in order for us to have consistency. And so the purpose of the control vocabulary is that to organize a list of terms that identify the manuscript or the movie or the art or anything else in a way that everyone will understand what does it entail. One of the things that we usually have is a list of words. And so the idea is something that we are allowed to use when we are using the library to search in the library. We are allowed to search for academic libraries or branch of libraries and have related terms in order for us to search the library better. Which brings me to the subject of library, US library. If you've never been in the library, please do so, because this is something that we will learn next time with regard to information retrieval. If you will search, for example, my name in the library catalog, and you will see that there's a review, something that, and you will also see that my manuscript that I wrote has been part of the catalog. And if you do not have access to it when you are clicking on that, please sign in, and you will need to have your username and password in order for you to do that. I highly recommend that you will use it in order for you to have better skills with regard to the library. Another thing that we talked about with regard to DAWI classification is the subject heading. They are the control vocabulary of subject that can be added to the records. For example, in my textbook, they added the idea of statistics, they added the idea of open source R, and they add the idea of visualization. So they may contain similar relationship between the term, and they are part of bibliographic records, and they are part of the index tool. One of your assignments for next time will be about what is the indexing tool. We will learn about that in the context of information retrieval. So the subject heading is very complicated but not easy to use. It is similar to the series subject headings, less complete but easy to use. And again, this is a subject that has been discussed quite often in the field of information retrieval. Is the subject heading is important. The subject heading is the word to describe the manuscript. And this is really important when you will learn about how do we classify or what subject heading do you use to describe your blog. How do you want user, when they are searching for your blog, to identify the terms that associate with your blog. And the control vocabulary, we have subject headings and we have similar terms, and all of them are part of how we do that. If you are from the field of medicine, subject control vocabulary and subject heading is part of your vocabulary. You will need to have a strong understanding of medical subject heading. And if you're going to work with a big company such as Sears or even Walmart, you will also need to learn about the subject headings that they use in their catalog. And so all of that come together when we're going to start talking about what is the future and how do they apply. in regard to the future. How many of you has a Pinterest account? If you don't, this is something that is really interesting and something that is really interesting, because what they do is allowed you to create your own classification based on the subject you like. Example, I'm a big fan of visualization, so I created myself as subheadings that entails all the type of visualization that often entail in how to apply. I also like statistics, so I have a lot of platform of statistics and how they apply. And this is again the modern way of how organized knowledge is being done. So this is it for this time. I hope you enjoyed that. I will give you more reading to do this time. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email or ask me. Until next time, have fun and enjoy.